Sup guys, today we're going to talk about how Nintendo won the console wars.
There's competition
There's
in
competition in
absolutely everything. We wouldn't
everything.
have most of the
wouldn't
things
have
we
most
do
of the
today if
things
it
we
weren't
do
for
today
competition and
if it weren't for
comparisons.
competition
That's the
comparisons.
reasons why we have
That's the
such
reason why
wonderful
we have
fast
such
food
wonderful
chains like
fast food
Zaxby's.
chains like
Competition is
whatever
what
that is.
strives us to be better. If
To
we
be
never
better.
had it,
If we
we
never
would
had
become
it, we would
complacent
become
and never
complacent
strive to
and
become
never
the
strive
best
to
versions
become the
of
best versions
ourselves.
of
The
ourselves.
console wars is one of the most
Console Wars
well-known examples
is
of fierce
one of the most
competition. A little history lesson if you may or may not know. Nintendo back in the 80s single-handedly saved the video game market from total collapse. Everyone was on their way out until Nintendo introduced the iconic Nintendo Entertainment System, or NES for short. It was packaged with a small indie game, you might have heard of it, called Super Mario Bros. And it absolutely exploded and revitalized the gaming market. Without Nintendo, gaming as a whole might have just stayed a dumb fad for kids in the 80s. But thanks to Nintendo, gaming was reshaped into what we know today. For the better half of the 80s, Nintendo had an absolute stranglehold on the market. And I mean, how could they not? The Legend of Zelda, Super Mario, Metroid, these guys had it all, and everyone wanted a piece of that Nintendo pie. Enter Sega, who was also in the gaming market, but due to Nintendo's absolute dominance over the market, they had to innovate. Mario was just too popular, but not only in Japan, the entire world as a whole. They needed something new. Alex Kidd just wasn't.
What?
And the entire world as a whole. They needed something new. Alex Kidd just wasn't gonna cut it. They needed someone that could rival Mario and sell their much new powerful 16-bit console, the Sega Genesis. Coming now,
the Sega Genesis.
So Oshima, Hirokazu Yasuhara, and Yuji Naka. These three developers would go on to create Sega's all-new Too Cool mascot, Sonic the Hedgehog. This guy was fast. He was cool. Mario was a nice guy who followed the rules. Sonic was the guy in detention all the time because he was simply always a nice guy who
followed the rules.
Sonic was the guy in detention all the time because he was simply always causing mischief. This was the birth of the console wars. Sonic released to critical acclaim and spawned an entire generation of degenerates on the internet. When you think of what pop culture was like in the 90s, Sonic was there. He was everywhere. His blistering speeds and snarky attitude was a perfect foil to who Mario was, and a perfect representation of what cool looked like in the 90s. This made Sega the first real contender for Nintendo's throne in the gaming market. The Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis were battling it out for who could come out on top. The graphics were relatively similar, both supporting 16-bit graphics and the like, but the real draw were the games. Sega back in the 90s had a strong lineup of games to battle Nintendo. They were focused on a more adult audience, while the big end would cater to mostly younger kids and families. Games like Sonic the Hedgehog 1, 2, and 3, Golden Axe, Phantasy Star, they would go on to directly oppose the juggernauts that were Super Mario World, Super Metroid, the list goes on and on. Looking at the results,
even looking at the results, I think they speak up for themselves.
Worldwide, Nintendo was still the king, but in the United States, people were pretty torn on what was the best, as both the Super Nintendo and the Genesis sold pretty equally, with the Super Nintendo barely beating it out by about 2 million units. The console wars were mainly a Western thing anyway, but it's clear that there was real competition here, and the choices of the people really mattered. Although Sega did drop out of the console market eventually due to very poor decisions made later on, that doesn't mean the war stopped yet. Once PlayStation and Xbox joined in, the discussion became a lot more nuanced. The reason I talk about this, to go this deep into the console wars of yester millennium, is to paint a picture for you, to illustrate what real competition looks like. The console wars, especially in the United States and North America as a whole, was a very real thing. Of course, it's not super serious in retrospect, as it never really is, but you had to make a major decision on which console was worth getting over the othermost games. You could get on that
other
generation
consoles.
was defined by the games the consoles were loaded onto. The console wars of today are a very different story. Mainly it's been the Xbox and the PlayStation that's been feuding all this time, and probably the longest out of any gaming generation. Sega had dropped out of the console race, so Nintendo, Sony, and Microsoft were all that were left in the early 2000s,
Exactly.
and even to this day, they still stand tall as the only
They
three
are
console
still the only
manufacturers
three
that
console
really
manufacturers
matter.
that
Sure,
really
the
matter.
other consoles came in and tried to throw their hat into the ring. They wanted to try and take a piece of that gaming pie, as gaming is the biggest medium of entertainment today, so I mean, who wouldn't? The only company being mildly successful in this endeavor was Facebook with the Quest series of VR series of VR.
I never knew that they would join the gaming market.
Headsets, but until the day everyone goes VR only, which will probably never happen, let's be honest, they'll never really have a stake in the gaming landscape. And Google, we don't talk about Google. Regardless, and Google, we don't talk about Google.
Wait, what do you mean? Yeah, Google, it looked like Google sucked in here. I think that Google has no experience with gaming, so I think they should suck an ass. But I mean, if there's only one good thing that was good on Google, it was this. Just wait for a moment. Yeah, this one. It was the only thing that Google made that was the only good thing. Nostalgia. Hey, look, I think Google upgraded it a bit. You see, yeah, that's the only good thing that Google ever made, and that was the only foothold that Google made in the gaming thingies.
Regardless, ever since the early 2000s, Nintendo, Sony, and Microsoft were the companies to look towards when a new console was released, and fans have been up in arms on the internet ever since about which console was the best. To take a look at today's landscape of the quote-unquote console wars is quite pathetic. Let's take a look. Nintendo has usually been on the ball when it comes to releasing
Yeah, Nintendo was always the only thing that the only company that used yesterday's hardware in tomorrow's games.
Consoles, as they're usually ahead of the generation for a while until PlayStation and Xbox released their new consoles within a week of each other. At least when it came to the last two generations anyway. In the current generation of consoles, Nintendo released the Switch on March 3rd, 2017, which is over 3.5 years ahead of the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X. This console was mostly released this early as the Wii U was just killing the company. They were constantly losing money, so they needed something quick, and the Switch was the answer. This 3+ year gap actually gave them a prime opportunity to release games for their new console and to garner sales quicker than the PlayStation and the Xbox. Breath of the Wild, Mario Odyssey, Splatoon 2, Xenoblade 2, all massive first-party releases only in the first year of the Switch.
And yeah, they were very much a big hit.
Switch's life cycle. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is one of the most influential video games ever created. The amount of freedom and exploration was never seen in a game to this scale before, and it all came out on inferior hardware. So many other game studios are desperately trying to recreate the legacy that this game has. Super Mario Odyssey taking the much beloved structure of Mario 64 and bringing it into the modern age, creating a
I guess Nintendo was still honored Super Mario 64 because it was influential of its time.
Lovely game that rewards exploration and movement. Xenoblade Chronicles 2, if you're willing to look beyond the strangely hypersexualized character designs and horrible tutorials.
What?
This game offers an incredibly in-depth story about finding hope in a dying world.
I think it was pretty good for its own plot. but I guess the characters weren't painted in that way.
Amazing world with even better characters, a combat system that rewards you the further you master it. The list just goes on and on. This game is an absolute favorite of mine, so I have a natural bias towards it. And those were just the games that Nintendo made / published within the first year. Those aren't even counting ports or...
I always will watch people play Super Mario 64 with my brother. Super Mario Odyssey with my brother on TV every time, since I don't have a Switch. Please get me a Switch.
Remasters of mostly Wii U titles, since pretty much no one bought them on the Wii U. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe.